how many of you actually are either in the midst of developing a quality system or are even before thinking about developing a quality system? There we go. Okay, so at least I got one, and this is good because as I was going through this, I had heard most of the participants are very early stage and really don't have much of an understanding of the quality system and stuff like that. So what occurred to me was, how could I relate it to something that we pretty much all understand? And I realized a bakery or a restaurant are really good examples of quality systems that we just simply take for granted. The more I dug into this, I also realized it's not very dissimilar from a medical device rules. So you may wonder why I'm using that background. That's my kitchen. Last November, late October, we had a water leak. We're just now into the restoration phase, and it's total chaos in our house. The flooring will go in next week. So you're more than welcome to come over and share my pain, but you don't have to. So, okay, why is this not? Oh, there we go. My contact information, there it is. I'll also send you a copy of the regulations in email form, in a Word file. If you would like it, just request it and I'll send it to you. So heads up, I'm not going to go over all the regulations, okay? This is a 30-minute presentation overview. And what I want to show you is really how similar these regulations are to so many other industries, I'll say, slightly different in the wording, but the intent is pretty much the same. Number two, here's a heads up. How many of you are in California? And if you are, we have some very specific state requirements, registration, inspections, and they have the same regulations as the FDA. And there's, I think, 5 other states that have these same kind of rules. Some quick definitions. CFR means Code of Federal Regulations. That regulation is enforceable as law. QSR means Quality System Regulation. The regulations, when we use that word, it means 21 CFR 820. And there's a number of other regulations that as your quality system and your product is developed, you're going to have to comply with. So QSR overview. The short answer is it doesn't tell you how to do anything. That's why you can go into one company and find out this is the way they do it, but you go into another company and it's a totally different way of doing stuff. Describes who, what, where, when, and in some cases why, but it doesn't tell you how. The manufacturer is responsible for ensuring the device is safe and effective and performs as expected and to comply with the regulations. So the food industry overview is you got an idea, you got a business, you got this FDA, USDA, state requirements. They go back and forth, back and forth. You got some people, they like your bread, they buy it. If they don't like your bread, they don't buy it. And if they get ptomaine poisoning, food poisoning, somebody at the FDA, local, state, or something will come knocking on your door. And I actually have a dear friend of mine that got a settlement out of a food poisoning event. Fortunately, she's doing fine now, but is under a non-disclosure to disclose how much she got for it. Same kind of phenomena here, where you guys you've got an idea for your product. You're going to go into manufacturing. In this case, we've got some FDA, state, and national authorities, depending on if you want to go offshore. You also will have some customers. And the same thing there, they're going to buy it or not buy it. They may complain. And if that complaint goes up to either the FDA, state, or national authorities, same, call it dynamic, same behaviors, just a different industry. But a quality system, if I could bullet point why we do it, it's a recipe for success. It gives you a consistent framework and language, and it's totally adjustable as needed. If you think this thing is casting concrete, you can remove that from your mental blocks. It could be changed. It could be made, call it more flexible. It may become more onerous depending on your product. So during the development of this presentation, I initially started off with just a bakery. But I was talking to a friend of mine who's the executive chef at a fine local dining establishment here in Orange County, and I asked a simple question: are your ovens calibrated? And she says, absolutely. Refrigerators, freezers are all monitored. And if you think about it, when they put something in the oven at 350, I'll say, they want to know that that temperature is 350, not 320, not 380 or whatever. Same with the refrigerators. You got refrigerated requirements, you got freezer requirements, temperature requirements, a little more stringent than at home, but functionally the same thing. And they're all monitored. I found it fascinating when we started digging into this. And the similarities to FDA regulations became more evident and equivalent. So I picked two sections out of the regulations, and one is on device packaging and one's on handling. And the device packaging simply says each manufacturer will ensure that the device packaging and shipping containers are designed and constructed to protect the device from alteration or damage during the customary conditions of processing, storage, handling, and distribution. That would be the same thing you would do with a bag of bread or a bag of cereal. They would fall under the same kind of rules. In handling, one word I do want to focus on is the word mix-ups in this. Each manufacturer shall establish and maintain procedures for ensuring that mix-ups, damage, deterioration, contamination, or other adverse events to products do not occur during handling. If I go back into my 40 years ago, we were bringing product in that was non-sterile from offshore. It was going to go to a sterilizer, be sterilized here locally, and then go into finished goods. We couldn't find a pallet of product. Actually, it was a couple pallets, but couldn't find it. Finally, fortunately, my production control person found it in finished goods. It was literally the next pallet to ship as sterile product. It was labeled sterile. And I'm walking around with my facilities manager. We had been asking them to give us a sterile product, non-sterile product receiving area. And they balked and balked. Well, the next day they're building up cages to control that product. And the focus there was simply mix up. If you can't mix it up, you reduce your likelihood of having problems a long way. So if you're baking bread, you assemble the ingredients: water, granular sugar, a list of equipment, preheat the oven, make dough, proof the dough, bake at 350, check the product. So what determines good bread? Tasting the product and people buying it again. But if you look at these instructions, in part, I downloaded them off the all-encompassing, always right internet. And could I make bread with those instructions? I don't think so. And what's missing? Well, one, experience. Now, in your quality system, one of the things that you get to fall back on is people's experience and training and education. Use it to your advantage. I had a company up in the Santa Barbara area that was making a intraocular implant material, and it was a PhD that formulated it, built it, measured it, made it. He was the only person that knew how to do it. He was also the only person that did it and had an FDA inspection, all the other stuff that goes along with it. And it was absolutely okay. Though a lot of the specific procedures were in this person's experience and training. So I just went down the list of FDA and an eatery, okay? Hope I skipped a slide there. We start with definitions. If you ordered a ribeye and got a filet, would you know the difference? I sure hope so, okay? Arugula versus kale, quality system, policy, procedures, how to of baking, management responsibility, the owner, the head baker, the executive chef, quality audit, line sous chef. Do you know that a sous chef or somebody on that line in a fine dining restaurant may very well taste your food before you get it? Now, initially I thought that was kind of disgusting, but they do to make sure that stuff tastes the way it's supposed to. Personnel, people, experience, training, and schooling. These are just the headings. There's some details that go in with all of this. You got design controls. They create a recipe, the menu creation, the plating. I don't know if you've been in the back of the house of a good restaurant. They have booklets that tell the line chefs how to plate a product so it looks good. Document controls, recipe and plating procedures, purchasing controls. I found out the executive chef pretty much does all the ordering, okay? I never knew that stuff. Identification, French, sourdough, best by dates. All of these are in the FDA regulations and not dissimilar from places that we eat at. Traceability. Does anybody remember the, I think it was a tomato or spinach recall food poisoning incident of a couple of years ago, about 10, 15 years ago? What was fascinating to me is they could trace the lot of vegetables, I think it was spinach, could have been tomatoes, to the plot of land at the farmer's farm, and it turned out to be slightly downhill from a pig farm. So the pig water flowed into the vegetable garden that went off to the food industry. The next thing you know, we have a recall and food poisoning. The Jack in the Box hamburger incident was E. coli in the hamburger, but it wasn't from the hamburger. It actually was from one of the employees not washing his hands. The next thing you know, we can no longer get rare hamburgers in the United States for the longest time. Production process controls, your ovens, your refrigerators. How many of you have ultra low refrigeration in your manufacturing processes? My hope is you have them calibrated, monitored, because the risk of that refrigerator shutting down and destroying the product is huge. We have a company locally that has probably somewhere in the tune of 50 refrigerators, ultra low temperature, regular temperature, and freezers. And the product impact is huge. So inspection, measuring, test equipment, ovens, calibrated, refrigerator, freezers, thermostats, timers. All of these will both protect your product and help you manage the manufacturing processes. Process validation. If any of you are chemists, my hope is you understand the concept of test validation, where you can do the repeated chemical process, probably run it 3 to 5 times before you deploy it. And the pharmaceutical industry, that's common. Devices, we're getting there. Receiving and process, receiving inspection, bring that stuff in, know what it is as you receive it, know that it's the right stuff, it's the right quantity. You may have to do some physical testing on it before you actually receive it, making sure it's perhaps the right material or chemicals. And from there, it goes to acceptance status. That means you know that it's okay to go to the next step, or it's okay to go out as finished goods. In this case, somebody might be buying the flour. I found out there's a big difference between King something or other flour and regular old Best Foods flour, especially to the bakers. And then non-conforming product, commonly to the trash, might be able to be repaired, but it's still got to meet the finished device requirements. That somewhere we have this corrective and preventive action step. In this case, if I looked at the restaurant industry, the investigation resulting from a food poisoning event. The timeline for that, once you get a few people in a county that are showing up with food poisoning, it's amazing what resources, both in the county, state, and federal levels, are suddenly activated. We had one a couple years ago where the majority of our local FDA investigators and testing staff were suddenly deployed to respond to this food incident The trouble was also, it started impacting our submissions, and our site inspections got delayed. So it's all connected, and in some cases totally invisible to us, but the effect can be huge. Device labeling, device packaging, just rolled over some of those rules on handling. Then you got storage for the product. Do any of your products have a temperature requirement at the product level? Sometimes a combination of products where they include a drug and a device will have storage requirements. I had a product a number of years ago now that was a radioisotope. Well, it had a half-life. It had a short half-life. So the time to go from manufacturing to the hospital was measured in days. So we had to make some serious adjustments to the quality system and the release process to be able to meet some of these very critical release days. Doable, yes. A little bit of work, yes. And we got FDA involved so they knew that what we were doing. Distribution, Weber's Bread, Dave's, French's Bakery, In-N-Out Burger. If you like In-N-Out Burger, you know it's best to eat it there. Don't take it home, okay? The sucker will be, I'll say, not as good. Soggy, it's not designed to be taken home. But they have some really impressive quality requirements to make an In-N-Out Burger, including their staff training. My grandson officially works for In-N-Out, while my granddaughter, his sister, works for McDonald's, and they're quite different. Installation, probably not applicable to bread, and the general requirements not applicable to bread. But if your product has some specific installation requirements, either at a hospital or if you're making a home use product, there's an entire ISO standard and FDA guidance document on home use. If you're making or considering a home use product, make sure you include that in your product development. We got this thing called the device master record. I'll call that the recipe. The device history record says, what are the ingredients in the recipe used? Who made it? How long did it take to do something? If it was supposed to be in the oven for 30 minutes, was it in the oven for 35 minutes or 20 minutes? Then the quality system record is all the procedures that are not device specific. So short answer is to why do we have this quality system? Same for a bakery, same for a restaurant, same for our airplane manufacturers. It's to reduce costs while meeting requirements, reduce confusion, improve consistency, reduce product liability, and close the information loop. The one thing I think all of us want to know is the product that we're intending to manufacture that's going to the customer, that's going to be used, the same product that we designed and intended that customer to get. That is kind of the ultimate goal. The same with a baked loaf of bread. The second layer of this, and my regulatory cousins will debate this with me, because I look at things first as a business requirement. I once did a presentation with the Food and Drug Administration, and even their position was that if you're really doing what's in the best interest of the business, you are following the regulations. And it was amazing to listen to the director, local director, say that, okay? Even to the point where we said that if you really did what's in the best interest of the customer, you wouldn't need the regulations. I don't know if I repeated that. So my regulatory cousins will put this first. You got to meet the regulations, you got to meet product requirements, you got to meet the labeling claims. If you're doing the business stuff, you're doing that latter stuff. Kind of a short synopsis of Project 101, especially if you're starting off. Start with the assumption it's going to cost you more than you budget. So wrap your head around that, just expect it. It'll take you more time than you expect. We first got quotes on our kitchen somewhere in the 12 to 16 weeks start to finish. We didn't anticipate COVID. We didn't anticipate my appliances being ordered in March and arriving in July, the warranty for an appliance commonly starts the day you receive it, not the day it's installed. Well, we received it June, July. They just got installed this month. Fortunately, I called the manufacturer. They're very lenient. They know all about this. But suddenly, wood vaporized. The cost of wood went up. The cost of doing anything went up. Labor costs, suddenly everybody's getting slammed. A couple of the people that were working on our project, suddenly they got COVID. I got COVID, and I was down for about 3 weeks. None of that we could expect. Okay, couldn't plan for it. Nor would I expect us to plan for a pandemic. But in your quality system, and I would say start lean. As it grows, expect it to change, be prepared for the unexpected with the goal of it being right-sized. You don't want people sitting around, but you also don't want some of your business transactions slowing down because you don't have adequate resources. The best I can say is expect change. It's going to happen. So give this some thought. When you read the regulations, when I send them to you, or if you download them yourselves, I want you to ask yourself the question, are they nouns, meaning a person, place, or thing, or are they verbs? And I'll let you answer that. Second thing, I want you to ask yourself this question. What are your next 3 steps to implementing your QMS? And then the last one is heads up, keep it simple. Look at the regulation, see how you comply with the regulations with the least amount of either paperwork, people, or overhead. If you start simple, you can make mistakes, you can add to it. But if you start complex, it's hard to reduce complexity. I would start with this. There are, one of the questions, how many people does it take to approve a document? And when I present this with, call it hundreds of people at quality conferences or whatever, they'll come up with 3, 5, 7, because that's how many it takes at their company. The regulation is very simple. It just says it needs to be approved. You can have one person approve a document, just one. I've tried selling that in companies and I've never been successful. They always like at least 1 over 1, kind of a spot check, sanity check, 2 eyes on the project. In wood, it's measure twice, cut once. Me, it's measure twice, cut 3 times anyways, because I don't do wood. Then, so your medical device manufacturer is not a lot different than bakeries or restaurants or most any other regulated industry. And we live in a regulated industry environment. Which is faster, reaction and resolution time to a food problem or a device problem? And I'll submit it's a food problem. Generally, a food problem affects a population, while a device usually affects a handful of people. Even if you're talking about hundreds of products shipped per month, you still only have 100 people probably impacted, while food is a much bigger problem. And oh, there I got answer to say, which has a greater impact on a population? Food. So I'm done. I'm now open to Q&A. I hope it helped. The other thing I'd like to convince you of, the regulations themselves are not as onerous as we want to give them credit for. What I would also ask is, before you do anything is trying to implement it, is read the regulation 3 times, all the way through. And I am convinced the first time you read it, it's like studying anything. First time you don't get it. The second time it becomes more clear. And by the 3rd time, you begin to understand it. I think in math, one of my professors said, advanced algebra was to learn basic algebra real well. But you don't really know advanced algebra until then you get into calculus and those things. So I'm done, and please open it up to questions. Now, Emily, do I want to turn this now back over to you?
What we can do is we can have any of the participants unmute yourself, get on video, ask your questions away, and I'm sure Rusty is happy to answer any questions. Or if you're a little bit more shy, you can also put it in the chat as well. Go ahead, Reza.
As a CEO, I cannot be shy. So I heard your names through different people. I heard good thing about Bill and other people. I'm very happy to listen to you guys for the first time. I am in San Diego. I am a member of SBDC. I just want to know how we can be more in touch because I have some connection with UCI also. So some students, some professors. So I have no idea what's ULP stand for, but my question was related to how we can get more out of these expert people with these experiences, because I really think experience matters. So
I'll speak for myself. I think experience matters. I think of what I used to know, thought I knew, learned I didn't. And now I've learned having people that know more than I do is to the advantage. As far as these resources, I think I'm going to have to punt to Emily and Bill.
Sure. Let me jump in, Rusty. Reza, I think I would have to have you be a little more specific as to the experience levels you're looking for, kind of get an idea of where the pain points are, areas that you could use some guidance on, and that would help me if
sure.
When you want to talk
That's a very good. I shouldn't leave it open problem. So one is for what you guys do to help the businesses to fundraise. That's our main thing we need right now. And the second part, just giving advice for fundraising and helping for what are the things that maybe we are not doing in our fundraising that we need to learn about how to explain our business model and all those things. So that's one thing. And the second thing is the subject of today project, which is today topic, which was about quality management system. We like to, how to say, until now we were reading the documents like 62304 software development, all those things. We are doing the medical device that is software as a medical device, and more specifically AI, artificial intelligence, machine learning. So we are I don't know, patented very top of the line multimodal machine learning. We have been working with the different early adopters. So we like to work with UCI too, but we haven't practically engaged or yet. So I just want to know what would be for me as a startup, what would be the requirement to get help for these two areas I just mentioned.
So let me, since I already have my mouth open, I'll keep on talking. If we have consultants here that can help guide you through that, it depends on where you're at. I'm assuming from what you just said, you've got some type of working prototypes.
Yes.
You've gone through all the necessary customer discovery. You've got a pretty good idea what that customers like what you're trying to do. You're solving a pain point for them. So if all of those, Risa, are in place, certainly could assign you to one of our consultants. It's nothing more than a 5-minute detailed form you fill out. We send you a link, you complete it, and you become an SBDC client. We also have centers, though, in San Diego. You might want to approach them just for simplicity. There's a very good group of people down there. You can reach out to the San Diego network. And if for some reason it's not connecting or it's not what you want, certainly come back to me, and I will do everything I need to do to facilitate what your needs are. Does that sound all right?
Sure. So I just keep your contact information and communicate with you.
Absolutely. Try it again. I only say in San Diego because we have networks in every city. So we try to keep everybody in the same place. But for you, for convenience sake, if you want to actually go to their facility, it's a lot shorter drive than it would be to here.
But right now, I feel it comfortable with the Orange County. I think Orange County has a very good group. So
okay, then what I'd have you do is send me an email with the information I need on there, and I will go through the assessment process and find the right consultant that I think would be best positioned to help you, and we'll take it from there.
thank you, Bill. I appreciate it. I will
Certainly.
try to find your email after the call. So thanks.
Hi, this is Jane Zhang from Remy House. Thank you so much for the session. Thank you, Rusty. I have a specific question about the QSR for different types of parties that receives FDA registration approval. For example, if it's a contract manufacturer versus importer versus requirement designer, is there different levels of QSR that each of these parties need to follow?
Yes, if you're talking about a specification designer, okay, let me ask you this. Is that specifically all they do? They don't receive any of the product and then redistribute it. If they just design it, then they're a specification developer. If you're a designer and you want to send out samples to potential customers, stuff like that, now you're manufacturers. There's actually a real good, if I can call it a real good, warning letter on that very issue. So there are other very specific requirements, non-conforming material, corrective preventive action, management review that are required for specification developers. If you're talking about the CMO, the contract manufacturer, they don't design the product, they just manufacture it. So they would only have applicable those elements, excluding design control, that they would have to comply with. They would also, everybody registers with FDA. I have a matrix that kind of goes through that. But what you'll need to do is find out what are those activities that the company goes through. Now, if you're talking about the importer, for instance, okay, the initial importer registers, but subsequent distributors don't have to, depending on, of course, what they do. So in that case, what you can do is go to FDA's website, look up establishment registration, and there will be definitions of each one of those entities that you just described. Component manufacturers don't need to comply with the FDA regulations. They're specifically excluded. Does that help?
Yeah. So I'm just wondering, like, the level of granularities and the sections that need to be required or included in the QSR for, let's say, an initial importer would probably be different from a contract manufacturer or contracted designer.
Absolutely. So hypothetically, if you took that table of contents that was in the presentation, or take the regulations and take the table of contents, you'd find for an initial importer, a lot of those requirements don't apply. Now, I want to back up a second and I want to confirm this, but as I recall, an initial importer is not a manufacturer, and I'll confirm this, and if you shoot me an email to remind me, but an initial importer does not need to comply with QSRs.
A follow-up question in that.
Sorry, can you just send me the email again, the Rusty? Can you type it in the chat by any chance?
Oh,
I
yeah.
missed it. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much.
Just a follow-up question related to Zane's question. Actually, if we design, let's say, a medical device in Europe, and the designer only designing it, and then we have to find our own manufacturer. So based on what you said, only the manufacturer is going to register. And of course, we also need to register because we are putting the whole system and provide it to FDA.
The specification developer in Europe would register with FDA.
Also?
Yes.
I thought if you are designing a chip with them, are they still need to register?
Is the chip the medical device? or is it a component?
Okay, so I don't know answer to your question. So is there, because components is very broad, so I don't know answer the components. What is the component? So the chip could be a part that is going to the board when you
That's right.
manufacture a board. Yes.
It's a component.
Okay.
The stuffed board, the PCB with components on it, okay, it's a component.
So do they
Once
need
that-
to register? Do they need to
No.
register?
They're a
So, but
component
they-
manufacturer. They
but
do
they-
not need
they-
to register.
But they are, okay, so I think, let me step back. So they do the design and they are a specification developer. They are
No,
not.
sir. No, sir. Are they designing the finished device?
No, they don't.
That's right. So they're not a
So-
specification developer. A specification developer is a entity that designs the finished device, but specifically does not manufacture it. That's
Okay.
why I
So-
would, that's outside the scope of, I'll call it this session, but it's a great question because a lot of us don't know those definitions. Go to just FDA establishment registration and look up the definitions of the various entities. And you'll find, for instance, the specification developer designs the finished device specification, not the tubing specification, not the wiring specification, in this case, not the PC. They may design the PCB also, okay?
Okay,
But-
sorry, I don't want to take too much of the group
good.
time, but just last comments is that I shouldn't say they don't do even the chip manufacturing part. We will send it to TSMC. So
Mhm.
are they still considered the way you mentioned, or yeah, I think then that it should be the way you mentioned it. They don't need to register.
Let's try it this way. Does this entity design the finished device? Yes or no?
No, answer is no.
That no says do not register.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome. And obviously the opposite is true. If they design the finished device, then it's a yes, register. $5,500 a year roughly.
It's now 5,700,
Thank you very much. I knew that as soon as I said 55.
5% every year.
That's right. That's right. And not counting California's.
Yes. And so thank you, Rusty, I appreciate it. I wanted to just let you know our experience, because from all of the discussions here, we are registered with the FDA as a medical device establishment. We are primarily focused on class 2 devices, consumer, OTC, and then prescription.
Okay.
And the FDA has audited us because we don't manufacture, but we were listed as a specification developer. And
Mhm.
so they came down to audit us, and they looked at us and said, well, you're utilizing 13845 and QRS certified factories in China that we audit through
Mhm.
Intertech or UL.
Mhm.
And so we have that FDA certification that they meet all the requirements. But quite frankly, in looking at our company, we're not a specifications developer, even though we own the patents, we handle all the distribution. So the FDA changed us from a specifications developer to a relabeler, because we're bringing in the finished goods.
Oh, you are, and putting your name on it.
Yes,
You're a relabeler.
relabeling, even though it's our product, we have the patents, we own the tooling. It's
Uh-huh.
just, that was the way that they felt best defined our organization.
So you have somebody else manufacture it.
Correct,
Somebody else designed it.
correct.
They're registered. You bring in the finished device, put your label on it. You're a relabeler.
Yes.
Yep.
And
Which
still,
should take a lot of the onus off you.
well, it does, well, twofold. Number one, you have to have really strong agreements at the factory level,
Absolutely.
but also internally, we need to have a quality system regulation basically set up in our system that can regulate the design, that regulates, design controls, our device establishment, all of that. And also to be able to, on the consumer side and the medtech side, be able to have the ability to monitor and log in all of the issues.
Yep, complaint
users.
handling.
So yes.
Yep.
So anyway, that's how our experience with the FDA going from what we thought would be the specifications were a relabeler.
Yep. And actually, in that respect, I will say they helped you, because if you're a specification developer, that has a lot of more overhead associated with it and plus it opens you up to questions that all land on we don't.
Yes.
And then they say, so what am I doing here? They changed you. That was kind of cool.
Well, they still want to be here just to follow back up. But,
Absolutely.
But still, with that, so I appreciate that, but I wanted to just share that because how you define yourself is very important within the device establishment system.
Absolutely agree. Thank you for that one.
Rusty, I have another one about the software, in terms
Okay.
of having a software as a medical device or anything that falls into that realm of things. Is there any specifics in the QSR that is different from a physical hardware product?
The QSRs are broad and will include both, call it hard entity and soft entities. Okay. There's some specific guidance documents from FDA on software as a medical device. The second thing you're going to want to ask yourself on the software side in particular is, one, is there a classification of it already? But also what we call the level of concern that will tell you how much documentation you need to submit to FDA with your application. Higher level of concern, there's a minor, moderate, and major. If you're a major, something can go wrong, people die. Misdiagnosis, then you're going to have more documents to submit to FDA than a moderate or a minor. You won't find those in the QSRs though. The system to manage software is in the QSRs. And then there's also very specific software development documents.
It seems there are 3 people, so if nobody asks any question, I ask one more.
As far as I don't know where Emily is, but as far as I'm concerned, I've committed as much time as you guys need outside of getting dinner tonight. Go ahead.
So our whole, our whole product covers 3 layers. One is the sensors, wearables. One is our edge computing, which is doing most of the softwares. And one is the cloud computing, okay? So if the software is running on the edge, which is software running on the phone, if we are getting software regulation for the sake of the software, do we need to also get all the proof that this software, any integration of anybody else software in our software, do they need to also, if the sensor is already, the sensor layer is already FDA, but we are integrating some software in our software to get the information, how we should package it for FDA?
First question I'm going to ask is there already a predicate device? So are you going to go down the 510K pathway or the PMA pathway?
510K.
There you go. Okay. Now the question is, what's your level of concern?
Medium.
Why do you think that?
I mean, we just went through question and answered those questions. So
there you go for the level of concern decision tree.
Yes.
Yep. And so you're a moderate. Okay. There's minor, moderate, major. And if you're moderate, that will tell you the documents you need to submit to FDA with your 510K package.
So if we are getting SDK for this specific sensor to have a like an API to talk with our rest of software, that is considered, maybe we need to get one document from them to explain their SDK, or?
In that case, what you're probably going to want to look at are the handshakes between you and your software intermediaries to make sure there's no, let's call it data corruption or misdiagnosis, misdecision trees, decisions. The software, is it making a decision?
Okay, I got your point. Actually,
Yep.
okay, if they are making any decision, then that's important. If they don't make any decision, then less important.
Correct.
Okay.